Imagine arriving at school and being told that because you're white, you're racist, or being so bogged down with gender and sexuality studies that you can't read or write. This is what our kids are facing every day across America. And if Biden has it his way, it's only going to get worse. Trump recently called this left wing brainwashing of our kids a program for national suicide, and he urged us to act before it's too late. Today, we'll take a deeper look at what's going on in our schools, what's behind critical race theory, and how parents are fed up and fighting back. Welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse, coming to you live from Columbus, Ohio. Hopefully everything's working today. Sorry about the hiccup yesterday. We're going strong though. We won't stop. And we're covering an important topic today, which has been going on for quite a long time, a lot longer than we've been aware of, but it's now really hitting the forefront. It's really getting into the limelight, the spotlight, which is a good thing because these things have to be exposed. So first, thank you everyone for joining me. Make sure that you're subscribed, hit the little subscribe button. Make sure that you are, hit the notifications hit. If you're watching on YouTube, I do recommend you go over and watch me on Rumble. Though it does help the algorithms to reach more people on YouTube, which is why I'm on YouTube, because that's where the majority of folks are. But if you do want to watch on Rumble and support the uncensored platform and big tech, which our President Trump is going to be going after now, that would be great. So again, today's topic, critical race theory. I'm really trying to present things on this show in a way that hopefully if you have friends or if you're watching this and maybe you're not sure what to think about it, you're sitting in the middle of it, you've heard both sides of the story. I want to take a deeper dive into what is critical race theory? What are the origins of critical race theory? Is it something that has historical precedent? Is it something that may have been used before in communist countries? We're going to look into this, but we're also going to be taking a look at what parents are doing to fight back, the opposition from the school boards, the opposition from the teachers' unions, and just look at the overall war that's being waged. And if you look at the thumbnail of this video, and it's the war on our children, this is what it is. It is the children that are being sent off to war every day. Whether we know it or not, we put them on the bus. They're going into a place where they're being, not all schools, I do know some teachers that really stand up for the more patriotic view, the true history of our country. But a lot of these children are being subjected to some pretty nasty stuff, and it's really affecting them. So let's first just jump into what's the big news that's happening currently. What do we have? It's, kind of hitting the headlines. So I'm not sure if you saw this. Let me make this full page for you. I'm going to read a little bit about this, but the National Teachers Union, it's the American Federation of Teachers, the AFT. So this is incredible. They have put an additional $2.5 million into a legal fund to fight parents for control of the education curriculum. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't teachers work for us? Isn't it our tax dollars that are funding the school systems? So why is it that the parents who have children in these school systems have these legal defense funds being assembled to go after the parents for basically for questioning what their children are being taught? To me, this is a very, very big red flag. So let's look at what's happening though with this very large teachers union. So this is the American Federation of Teachers. So it says a national union led by hardline leftist Randy Wintergarten has announced adding $2.5 million to a legal fund specifically intended to fight parents for control over education curriculum, which is just completely, it's almost like you would imagine a politician that we elect coming after us for questioning their agenda and saying, look, I'm going to sue you. You don't have the right to question what I'm doing as the politician that you elected. Kind of sounds like the Biden regime, but maybe it's just me. So here's what they said. Quote, "Mark my words, our union will defend any member who gets in trouble for teaching honest history." This is Weingarten said in remarks during a virtual address to union members. She also said, quote, "Teaching the truth is not radical or wrong. distorting history and threatening educators for teaching the truth is what's truly radical and wrong. And then in an interview, she said the union is adding 2.5 million to an existing legal defense fund in anticipation of local fights over the teaching of race. The funding will be used to defend teachers who were disciplined for teaching about slavery and racism. She said the union is also considering filing lawsuits to get clarification about new state laws limiting how racism can be discussed in schools. So, if you look at what's happening with this, one thing that's really important to point out is that the people that are pushing the critical race theory, they have already established the fact that they're the ones teaching truth. They're the ones with truth on their side. It's no longer open for debate, right? 1619 theory, the founding of our country, everything, it's no longer open for debate. So you can see how she's phrasing it and saying that, well, teachers shouldn't get in trouble for teaching truth. And again, this is look into Saul Alinsky, this is a very common tactic of, communism, for one, is redefining what is true. This is Orwellian's. How many fingers am I holding up? They're creating a new definition for terms. It's like what we've seen happen with tolerance, or social justice, things that sound very lofty, but these are all Trojan horses. And I'll talk about Trojan horses a few times throughout this show because communism, it's all about Trojan horses. What the Trojan horse? It's infiltration. It's sneaking something in and then letting it out. So they're sneaking things into this. And even with them identifying as this is the truth, they're already starting this, they're pushing it. And so it makes you think, well, for people that are sitting in the middle, it's like, well, yeah, why are all these crazy Republicans, all the, they're using the CTR or CRT as the boogeyman, right? So they're using that to say, look, you're attacking, all we're doing is teaching truth, right? Well, who defines what truth is? And what if truth becomes something that not only is false, but something that is very, very harmful to children themselves, which we'll get into today, to our country, to everything. So what happens when they label those things as truth and say you can't attack that? Well, let's look at what's happening in the legal system right now. So again, as I do with every show, all of the links that I have that I'm going over with you, I'm putting in the bottom of the description below. So if you want to follow along, if you want to do your own research, I really encourage you to, because that's the best way that all of us can fight a battle. It's an information battle right now. So as much as the mainstream media is pushing a certain narrative, it's so important for us to understand and educate ourselves so that we can counter those points. So if you're talking to a neighbor or a family member and they say, well, this is how it is, you can say, actually, let me show you this article. Did you know what was really happening X, Y, and Z? So it's very beneficial for us. So I really encourage you to take all the information that I'm presenting, read it on your own, look at it on your own. And also, if I'm wrong about something, let me know, right? Don't take what I say as the gospel. Take everything with a grain of salt, because it's really, really important. So what I put up here for you, though, to look at, I found to be very, very helpful, because what we're seeing now is that everything is happening at a state level and a local level. So this is on heritage.org, which is a fantastic, fantastic website and organization. And they've done so much to track what's happening with critical race theory, to educate folks, to empower you. So what they have here, this is a map of the United States. So this allows you to see what all of what the legal status of critical race theory is in your particular state. So for me, I'm in Ohio, and so I can click on it and it shows which bills have been introduced. You can track the progress of them. It gives you links to go look at the exact bill itself and see what the text is. So you can bounce around. Let's just say that you're in Idaho. You can see what the current laws are that are dealing with this. So this is really important because, again, we have to know what's happening within our legal systems, especially at a state level, because as we've seen over the last 18 months, we've seen how much power states have over our lives, whether we live under, Governor Newsom in California, and they're saying, you have to wear 6 masks and a helmet and a hazmat suit if you want to step outside, and you can't go to the beach because you'll probably die if you go to the beach, versus Florida, where you have Ron DeSantis, which is saying, look, we're opening up, we're banning critical race theory, et cetera. So it's so important for us to understand what's happening legally in our states and allow that to control our decisions, because, look, I'll be the first to admit, I have not paid attention up until recently what was happening in statewide politics. I was focused on the election, focused on DC, on Congress, et cetera. But we have to be more focused on what's happening on the ground. So yeah, see, you suck commenting. You meant Dictator Newsom. Yeah, Dictator Newsom, Comrade Newsom out there, and Comrade Cuomo over in New York. So understanding what's happening here. So another development that's happening with critical race theory is so we have people like DeSantis that are passing these laws to ban the teaching of critical race theory. But the teachers have organized and now they're opposing that. So if you look at, so I'll pull this article up. So Gateway Pundit, more than 5,000 teachers have signed a pledge to teach critical race theory regardless of the law. So I'll read into this and I have a recommendation coming from this. So I'll start with the article. So throughout much of 2021, conservatives in both classrooms and the halls of state legislatures have been fighting back against the pervasive influence of critical race theory in public schools. Laws banning the instruction of critical race theory tenets in public schools have passed in more than 20 states, and there's reason to hope that the tide is beginning to turn in the fight for the country's history and principles. Unfortunately, the Zen Education Project refuses to accept defeat and desires to teach American children that this country was founded upon the dispossession of Native Americans, slavery, structural racism, and oppression, as opposed to the principles of liberty enshrined in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. So the organization is named after Howard Zinn, who's a socialist activist, and he's a historian who wrote, quote, wrote A People's History of the United States, which is a left-wing propaganda pamphlet disguised as a textbook. So scrolling down here, so the ZEP, the Zen Education Project, has circulated this. It's the pledge to teach the truth. Again, here's our language about truth, which identifies left-wing methods of analysis like critical race theory as the truth, as we talked about, as the truth, and decrees that the signees, all of whom are educators, refuse to be bullied into compliance with the law. So far, this pledge, the Zen Education Project pledge, has been signed by more than 5,000 educators in all 50 states, and many of the signees are more than happy to provide their reasons for signing. So now, the reason it's important to mention that is that within this, if you click on the Zen Education Project or you search for it, you can actually view the names of the teachers that everyone's signing. So you can go in there, and I was looking through and seeing, okay, what teachers from Ohio are signing this? What teachers from Florida? I noticed a lot of them were in California. Maybe it's a little coincidence, which I'm not sure what they're scared of out in California under Newsom, but it's really important because you can go on there and you can look and see exactly what teachers are in your local area, and you can they're putting their name publicly. So they're showing, so even if your state passes these laws, they're saying, look, we're going to still teach this. We're going to still teach this. We're going to still teach critical race theory, regardless of what the state laws say. So it's important that again, what is the big lesson that we're seeing here? This is what Trump is encouraging. That's what General Flynn is encouraging. The big lesson that we're learning here is that we have to get involved locally. And that's where I conclude the video with is actually some encouraging things about that. So that's one thing I'll say quickly is that this video does end on a very positive note. I know that sometimes these topics are heavy, and I try even to take the heavy topics and craft them in a way that we're still smiling towards the end of things because at the end of the day we're still breathing, we're still free to keep fighting on. But I'll get into what the teachers are doing and the opposition towards the end of the video. One thing I do want to show you, though, as I mentioned before, why education for us is so important as parents. And one website I highly recommend is, again, the Heritage Foundation. So the Heritage Foundation, this is the website that had the graph I showed you, the chart, which showed the legislation for critical race theory across the nation. So here, if we look at this, this link, again, is below the video in the listing. And if you're watching on Facebook, I'm not sure if the links are on the Facebook post, but they definitely are on in YouTube and I believe Rumble. So just check for that. But anyway, so this page, which I linked, this is a fantastic resource that you can use to educate yourself on critical race theory, understand what's happening in the news, the lawsuits, et cetera. So if you look through here, again, they're covering critical race theory in the military, protecting K through 12 students from discrimination, institutionalizing racial fanaticism across American society. So there's all kinds of articles and information here that will be really helpful. But also, for instance, here's an article, How to Identify Critical Race Theory, which is important because say we're looking over our children's textbooks. How do you know? Because they're hiding these things. They're trying to hide these things from the parents especially. So this is just a great resource for us to educate and understand what's happening, what it is, how we can combat it. But let's take it from a child. I want to play a short video for you. And for the people that are watching that maybe are not sure about critical race theory, well, one thing I can say that it does is it divides us into classes, right? It's the inverse of what Martin Luther King talked about in people not being judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And so one of the fundamental tenets of critical race theory is really pushing that whites inherently have privilege. And it doesn't have anything to do, say you have a black child that grows up in a wealthy home, gets paid whatever college he wants to go to, his parents are going to pay for it, has everything working for him, but you might have a white child that has grown up in terrible conditions, that the whole world is stacked against that child. And that child might be going to school and being taught that they're the person, they're the oppressor, that they're not the victim, right? So let's look at this short video of this young girl, which I'm just gonna play a clip of it. It's sad to listen to, but it's important to understand what this is doing to our children.
For example, I was told I have white privilege. How can a child born in an abusive drug and alcohol abuse home, who lost her entire biological family, that has experienced all forms of abuse and neglect, be privileged? If you found a child at 15 months in a home with holes in the floor eating cat poop, would you consider them privileged? Just asking, because when I was told that, I was so upset I cried myself to sleep. We have to stop the stereotypes and bitterness towards groups because it gets us nowhere but divided. I have no friends and can say HSE again has failed me. They are trying to divide us into two groups instead of bringing us together as one. Every day I felt less and less valued as a student and failed every class this past year. Academics are not important here, only how we feel and making sure we learn about sexuality, political topics, and emotional topics that teachers may or may not be able to handle, especially with trauma children like myself. I'm happy to move on and begin a fresh start and hope that this next school will love me for me and challenge me to grow in areas that I'm good at. I just want people to love one another, and the way we are doing it is wrong. Thank you for your time.
I don't know how someone can watch that and think this is a good thing to teach our children, to teach them. It's reverse racism. It's saying we're going to get rid of racism by becoming even more racist. And I don't know how you can watch that and still think this is a good thing to teach children, because children, doesn't matter what color you're going to, we are defined by our character. We're defined by our life circumstances. Look at this little girl, how she grew up in the foster system under unspeakable types of abuse, eating, cat droppings on the floor as a child when she goes into her story. How can she possibly be told that she should feel guilty for the color of her skin? And you can see, and what she also talks about there is it's not just the critical race theory is not just about race. It's an entire, there's an entire radical push for not just things about race, but also for the sexualization of our children, teaching children about sex much earlier, introducing, things that I wouldn't have even thought about talking about as a child. Even as an adult, I feel embarrassed to talk about. So it's not just the race. It's, if you look at a lot of the UN documents and what they're teaching, I mean, in the UN documents of the education systems that they're trying to push in the United States, some of them are being implemented for grade school children, talking about masturbation, talking about anal sex, talking about things that, gosh, even as I grew up as a child, you would never, ever discuss these things. And so there's another video I'm going to show you that, and I will warn you that some of the language in this video is a little bit coarse, to say the least, but this is a video of parents reading out of a book to the school board What was contained in this book are things that it's beyond me. It's beyond my mind how anybody would approve this information. Now, this book that they're reading from, this is for a freshman high school book. For I think it's for honors English at the freshman level. Keep in mind these children can't even drive a car yet. Yet this is what they're being fed. Just listen to this.
I came home early from babysitting and see her coming out of some car in these tight-ass little shorts, talking fast, telling me she's about to leave me. I grab her by the neck and start punching her. She wanted to be all big and bad, trying to face me like a grown-ass woman. She gonna get beat like a grown woman. She started screaming, cursing at me, and carrying on. I threw her in the closet for a couple of days. She kept on screaming, begging to be let out, begging for water. Every time she made too much noise, I'd walk in and kick her.
Jasper wasn't even my boyfriend, just this dude I did some hacking with once in a while. He was pretty basic library systems, low security shit. Not in my league at all, but he had a big dick, and sometimes a girl just needs a big dick.
I tiptoed toward the door, peering through the window at the boy, his pants around his ankles, squeezed between April's straddled legs as she lay on top of a teacher's desk. I gripped his arms and flipped him around, pushing him against the wall. His eyes widened, mouth dropping. "Hey, what are you doing?" He chuckled nervously. I took a deep breath before dropping on my shaky knees, the ground cold.
Me and Monday.
There's no need to keep playing that. It goes on. It gets worse. I actually stopped it before it got worse. This is a book. This is a book that they're having. This is mandatory reading for the sophomore or the freshman honors English class. That's what they're giving these children. Now, as you know with me, I don't like to look at things at the surface. I like to dig. What's behind this? Why are we seeing this? Why are we seeing the teachers union pushing this stuff? Why are we seeing the teachers, the school boards? Why are they doing this? What's behind this? Why is this attack happening on America? Well, let's look at one of the leaders of the entire critical race theory movement, a guy by the name of Ibram X. Kendi. So here's a quote from him. This is one of the main people that's been pushing critical race theory, but I want you to listen to this quote. He said in his book, he said, "The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination." I don't know about you, but this to me sounds like 1984. So let's take a deeper look at what comes behind this stuff. I'll read it to you one more time. As he said, the only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. So let's take a look at what quote that reminds me of. I'll pull it up for you right here. Mr. George Orwell in his famous book 1984, which is almost like it's like a handbook for how to live in 2021, where he said in his novel, "Those who control the past control the future, and those who control the present control the past." So I want to take a look into historically what's happening here. Where have we seen this happen before? What is George Orwell telling us? Why is he telling us that what's that mean? Those who control the past control the future, and those who control the present control the past. Is this something that I'm being met with? No. I know our history. I do my own research, but for an 8-year-old child that goes to school, that child's perception of the history of America is whatever they're taught. So the teachers, so we look at Orwell, the teachers who control the present, right, control what past is taught. So those teachers that control what is presently being taught to children, that defines their understanding, their worldview of what's happening in the past. And those who control the past control the future. And so what they're doing is they're using our children and steering our country into a certain direction. Here's some other quotes I'm going to share with you. Adolf Hitler in 1933 said, "When an opponent declares, 'I will not come over to your side,' I calmly say, 'Your child belongs to us already. What are you? You will pass on. Your descendants, however, now stand in the new camp. In a short time, they will know nothing else but this new community. He also said in 1937, the youth of today is ever the people of tomorrow. For this reason, we have set before ourselves the task of inoculating our youth with the spirit of this community of the people at a very early age, at an age when human beings are still unperverted and therefore unspoiled. This Reich stands and it is building itself up for the future upon its youth. And this new Reich will give its youth to no one, but will itself take youth and give to youth its own education, its own upbringing. So I'll continue on this, but what are we seeing here is that, and I'm going to Marx and Stalin and the great monsters of the human race. What we're seeing, though, is that the people that tried to overthrow countries, the people that brought in totalitarian governments, they knew, it was no secret, they knew that one of the keys to doing that was taking control of the children. Because they could, again, going back to Orwell, they could teach the children that their country has a terrible past and implant in them ideas of this new future, of this new present. And because they knew that, look, as much as I'm a patriot and I will do everything that I can to fight for my country, to stand up against tyranny, to stand up for freedom, what happens if my children are taught the opposite? What happens when their children are taught the opposite? It might only take a few generations before they can completely overthrow our country through the minds of the children. Karl Marx says, they tell us what they're doing. If you look, it's here. Karl Marx, the father of communism, said, take away the heritage of a people and they're easily destroyed. Is that not what's happening? Is critical race theory not taking away the heritage of America, reframing it, bastardizing the heritage of America? Young Berhoma, the Minister of Culture of Borneo, wrote, it published in the Brunei Times in 2013, a nation or generation that does not know the history of their nation is a nation that lost its identity and can be easily manipulated. And yeah, as Will Farnaby is pointing out in the chat, Marx was a Satanist. He vowed to wage a war against God. So for people that don't think this has anything to do with Satan or God or anything, you have to realize that the foundation of this ideology, the foundation of communism, was built upon atheism, a hate of God, and quite frankly, a worshiping of Satan. So that's the origin of this. So why do you think we have the sexualization, the degeneracy, the blending of genders, all these things that go straight back to a lot of the fundamental beliefs of Luciferianism and all these things that maybe were whispered about or were considered conspiracy theories, but it's right here, right? So the Communist Party Education Workers Congress said, talking about the children, we must create out of the younger generation a generation of communists. We must turn children who can be shaped like wax into real good communists. We must remove the children from the crude influence of their families. We must take them over and, to speak frankly, nationalize them. From the first day of their lives, they'll be under the healthy influence of communist children's nurseries and schools. There, they'll grow up to be real communists. Okay, and a few final quotes. This one it struck me so hard first time I heard this. Actually, I heard this first in the documentary by Curtis Bowers, Agenda. Vladimir Lenin himself said, give me 4 years to teach the children, and the seed I have sown will never be uprooted. Again, Karl Marx, the education of all children from the moment they get along without a mother's care shall be in the state institutions at the state expense. And Joseph Stalin sums it up perfectly. Education is a weapon whose effect depends on who holds it in his hand and at whom it is aimed. So as much as we're seeing the mainstream media completely freak out over what's happening with the critical race theory, and if you look at what's happening with them, they're saying, oh, it's McCarthyism. This is the new Republican, the new conservative boogeyman, critical race theory. They're all in unification, freaking out over the fact that parents and Republicans and conservatives and really just rational thinking human beings that care about their children are standing up against critical race theory. They've got something to hide and they're attacking it from all angles. So let's look, talking about the media. What did we just hear? What we heard here, Hitler talking about the community, right? Communism. It's about the greater good of the community, not the individuals. How about taking parents away from their children? So I want to show you a quick video that to me is frightening. This is a video. This is an MSNBC host talking.
We have never invested as much in public education as we should have because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments.
From the horse's mouth, right? For those of people that maybe don't think, when you talk to your friends and you say, look, I'm worried that mainstream media has a strong communist influence. I'm worried that they've got China in their ear. They're being controlled. They're being weaponized against us. Well, show them that video. Ask your friends. I have a lot of liberal friends, fantastic people that have just been lied to. They care about their children. They don't want their kids, raised like this. Show them that video. Is this the media company that you want to be getting your information from? How similar is what that woman said to exactly what Hitler was saying? You got to make it about the community. You have to detach the children from the parents. Why? Because they know that parents are going to teach them fundamental values they need to grow up with. Parents are not going to teach their kids that socialism is good. And look, if you're a parent and you're teaching your child how good communism is and how good socialism is, well, for one, you probably don't watch Man in America, but if you are, I'm praying for you because I feel like that if people that are doing that have had their minds completely taken over by, as I talked about, a dark satanic agenda that has infiltrated our country under the guise of communism. And I couldn't believe that, but let's just look at history because, right, let's look at the past. Let's look at what's happened because what's one way that we can understand what's happening right now? Let's look and see, are there examples of how things happened in the past that can help us understand what's happening right now? Now, I showed you all the different quotes from Hitler, from Stalin, right? What about communist China, who I believe to be one of the main foreign enemies, foreign actors that has completely taken control of so many of our institutions, including, I think, a strong influence over the teachers' unions. But let's look at what happened in communist China. Right here, Epoch Times article, which if you want to learn about communism and its infiltration, the Epoch Times is one of the best places to go to. So I want to read you something from this that is frightening. This is talking about the echoes. This is the echoes of Mao. This is I think it's a 9-part series all about, 19-part series all about the examining education in America. So let me go ahead and just read you this. This is very important. Again, if you have friends, and I hope that you can share, I genuinely hope that you can share this information with your friends. I hope that you can share this video with your friends or with other parents that care about their children, because we have to educate ourselves about this. So let me jump into this article, pull this up for you to show you, because this is frightening, but this is the reality of what we're dealing with right now. So similar tactics in communist China, talking about critical race theory. Victims of these tactics who have lived through the horrors that stem from them recognize the same schemes clearly. Prominent Chinese exile Lily Tong Williams, who grew up under Mao but eventually fled to the US, remembers those exact tactics being used in Mao's government indoctrination centers for children, masquerading as public schools. Quote, "It creates hatred, guilt, and division in our country." She said about, talk about the critical race theory. "It's a tool used by the radical left to divide and conquer." Having grown up during Mao's reign and experienced the entire 10-year Cultural Revolution, Williams sounded the alarm about what's happening in America today. This is so important. We have to listen to this. She says, "Let me tell you, this critical race theory is nothing more than a tactic to separate citizens into oppressed and oppressor classes, and it is something I have heard before. Mao's regime sought to destroy the four olds," she told the Epoch Times, referring to the mass murdering Communist Chinese tyrants' campaign to eradicate China's old ideas, its old culture, its old habits, its old customs, its old ideas. Quote, Mao, he and his regime used identity politics to divide people into 10 classes, 5 red and 5 black. The red classes included poor and low middle class peasants, workers, revolutionary soldiers, revolutionary cadres, and revolutionary martyrs. The black classes were landlords, rich farmers, counter-revolutionaries, bad influencers, and rightists. Every member of the Black classes was considered guilty by association simply for having been born into a family and was said to have been born Black. Does this not sound eerily reminiscent to what's happening right now? That if you're a white Christian in America, you're guilty by association, right? This is what these children are being taught. So, as she continues, Mao urged Red Guards to publicly shame the Black classes by raising their fists. Where do you see that? Where do you see the fist raising happening across our nation? Making them do self-criticism, confess, and denounce themselves. This is what we're seeing happening in school. They're having children go in front of the classroom to denounce their whiteness, okay? Or they'd get beat up, locked up into a room to write about their Blackness, apologize for their families or themselves, and be sent to re-education camps to do hard labor. That even some young members of the families would do anything to escape the shame and association, including reporting their own relatives to the CCP, reporting their own families to the CCP. Tens of millions of Chinese died amid the Cultural Revolution due to those murderous policies. And so the final quote, she says, "What is happening in America today with CRT in our schools and our workplaces and governmental agencies really reminds me of what happened during the Cultural Revolution." So this is something that we really need to understand because, again, if we're looking at critical race theory, we can't look at it in isolation. We can't look at it, look, as much as it's difficult to hear the stories of how it affects children, the psychology of children, their own self-esteem, how it affects them, we have to look at and understand that it's part of a bigger movement. It's part of a bigger operative. It's part of a longer plan that's been going on for close to a century between the Soviets and the Chinese communists to infiltrate our country and bring us down through the minds of our children. So we have to look at it from that lens. And if we have friends that are sitting in the middle, they're not really sure what to think about it, help them understand from that angle. Like, look at some of the past movements. Look at how Stalin, look at how Lenin, Mao, look at how they use the education of children as basically a Trojan horse to enter in, to take over. Okay, so let's jump on to the next article here, which I want to share with you. Look at this guy. Okay, we know Karl Marx. This is Teen Vogue. This is, as a kid, I remember the Vogue magazine. It's what the girls read. It was like the gossip magazine that the young girls would read. This is a magazine that's targeting, as the name says, teens, right? We have Teen Vogue. This is a whole article all about glorifying Karl Marx. Who is Karl Marx? Meet the anti-capitalist scholar. It says the communist scholar's ideas are more prevalent than you might realize. And this is a whole article. I'm not going to read it. It's garbage, but it's a whole article specifically idolizing Karl Marx and communism. So this isn't just the school system, right? Of course, the school system was one of the main indoctrination camps, but this is the magazines. It's the mainstream. Why do you think the entire mainstream media is defending this, right? Vogue magazine as another ad. Chalk it up to the overall mainstream media camp of cadres. So if you look at it, what we're seeing happening is a coordinated attack, right? So we have the teachers' unions, the education system, the school boards. We've got the mainstream media defending critical race theory. We've got even these teen magazines defending it. We have the president of the United States defending it and pushing policies that advance it. We have our military that's also defending it. So think about this. To me, that looks like there's something bigger happening. There's a coordination behind this that is even more concerning to me. And that's the big thing, is that this is a coordinated effort, right? And what effect is it having on our children, though? That's the real question. Are the children all becoming Marxists? Are they all becoming pro-socialism? Yeah. Okay. Here's a report that came out. This came out in 2020. Half of Gen Z supports Marxism and socialism. So a new poll reveals the disquieting extent of young Americans' support for Marxism. So it says the number of young Americans who have a favorable view of Marxism has increased 5-fold in just 1 year. According to the new survey, nearly 1/3 of the members of Gen Z Americans between the ages of 16 and 23, so 1/3 of Americans between 16 and 23 deem Marxism worthy of support. The term's favorability has skyrocketed to 30% among Gen Z respondents, up from 6% in 2019. Okay, from 6% to 30%. Gen Z's approval of socialism has also crept up 9 points since last year. So in 2020, 49% of people between 16 and 23 in America, 49% were favorable of socialism, compared to only 40% in 2019. So this was a big report that was done, this commissioned by the Victims of Communism Memorial, VOC, and conducted by YouGov. So this is what's being taught. This is the effect. Okay, for people, they're saying, look, it's harmless. Critical race theory is harmless. It's doing this. If you say, look, if you're trying to talk to a friend of yours and you say, look, this is introducing communism. It's teaching communism. That now communism is being treated as the boogeyman war. It's McCarthyism. Like, oh, you're just another one of those Republicans scared of communism. That's not really happening in our country. Show them this. Did you know that half of people between 16 and 23 are in support of socialism? So again, this is what's happening. This is what's happening in our schools. Now, I see a few folks that are asking about the Zen Education Project. I'm going to show that to you because about how to understand which teachers are signing this. So I'm going to pull back up. This is the zenedproject.org, right? So in the link below the video, I have this article. This is the Gateway Pundit article. And you can click on here for the Zen Education Project. There's a link to it. So this is the pledge right here. This is the article about the over 5,000 teachers that have signed saying that they're going to teach critical race theory regardless of what the statewide laws are. If you scroll down to here to the bottom, you can see this is interesting. It looks like they removed this. This is interesting. As of yesterday, this was all public. Okay, so no wonder folks can't see it. So literally, as of last night when I was doing my research, it was publicly showing the list of people that had signed this petition. Now, if you go back here, it no longer shows it. Now, they're saying that it's a public pledge. It's no longer showing that there. So again, they're hiding things from us. They're scrambling because they know that we're on to them. Like I said, literally last night before you come on here, it showed you a list of all the people signing, what state they're in, etc. And you could see and we could look at it. So that does not surprise me. It does not surprise me that this is being hidden now. And if you click on the graphic below, the I pledge to teach the truth, this is showing some of the highlighted folks that have signed it. So you can do some research and maybe you can poke around and find that, but they're making it much more difficult to find now. So no wonder you guys couldn't find that. So that's what's happening. And as I mentioned, back to what I was talking about, half of this age group. I wonder what the survey is for children that are, say, between 10 and 16. I wonder what percentage of them are pro-socialist. It's frightening to me. Is it in 10 years, are children going to be 95% pro-communist? Well, no, they're not going to be because we're fighting back. And also, as much as the mainstream media likes to make you think that the majority supports what they're talking about, the reality is that's not true. Because let's look at this article that was published in Breitbart, where they did a poll. This is very recently, and keep in mind, this was a Harvard-conducted poll, which the polls to me are almost always biased towards one way. So if the poll says that support for Trump is, say, 37%, I think, it's most likely 75%, right? But even in Breitbart here, we see that polls saying is 61% of voters say children should not be taught America is structurally racist. So I would say, look, if Harvard is saying 61%, let's just say it's 70%, or say it's even 63%, 66%. So 2/3 of American voters are against critical race theory. So that should mean something, because how are these things decided? Well, we vote for our school boards. We elect these people in. So if the majority of Americans stand up against this, and they are against this, then that gives us the power. So what it says here, it says that the online survey, or say a Harvard CAPS and Harris poll released last week, found that 61% of registered voters said children should not be taught America is structurally racist. This is encouraging. People are becoming educated. This is why, look, if you watch the mainstream media, they always tell you what they're worried about because they can't stop talking about it. Why do you think what they talk about for 4 years from 2016 to 2020? Nonstop, Trump. It's the one thing they're so scared of. What are they talking about now? The conservative opposition to critical race theory. Why are they talking about it? Because they're concerned about it, because we're making headway. Okay. One thing that's happening, how are we making headway? Obviously, we're seeing that the school boards are changing. That's one topic, but homeschooling. Okay. Let's look at this figure. Let's look at this graph. I'll make this full size for you. This is the homeschool students statistics from 1999 to 2020. So back in 99, there was 1.7% of children were homeschooled. Fast forward to fall of last year, it's over 10%, 11%. This is fantastic because as much as the people that we talked about in the survey, those Gen Z folks, they're the ones that are in school in the 90s, early 2000s, right? So now we're seeing a large chunk of parents are pulling their kids out of school. Now, why? Obviously, we're seeing all the COVID nonsense, which you could blame it on that. But there's an interesting point here. So this is from an organization, FEE, about this is the Foundation for Economic Education, about this investor talking about this. And he brings up a very good point. So what he's saying here, he's saying speculation abounds over whether or not the pandemic-induced growth in homeschooling is temporary. While there are several signs indicating parents won't be sending their children back to public schools this fall, and homeschooling continues to be a popular choice, the question remains for how long and to what extent. This is really, really important to understand. So what I'm going to read here, what he says is that this is interesting. I think it's the first time parents saw what their kids are getting in the classroom at the K through 12 level in many, many years. Most parents, if you're in your 30s or 40s and your kids are in 6th or 8th grade, you were taught in the classroom 30 years ago. It turns out some things have changed. So the current curricula is quite a bit different at a lot of schools. I know a lot of parents are just shocked, absolutely shocked at the stuff that was coming across. He added that some set of parents are like, I'm not sending my kids back to that. So this is really encouraging because this is showing us that people are waking up. They're pulling their kids out of school. Now, I know that everyone, you have your own unique circumstances. What can we do about this? I'm going to get into this to kind of end the show with. For one, get really involved at your school board level. Look at what they're teaching your kids. 2, focus on what your kids are being taught. Pay attention. If they're doing Zoom classes online, watch them. Watch what the teachers are telling them. Because, and this is why what this guy's attributing to the increase in homeschools, that parents are watching and saying, oh my gosh, you're being taught that? I wasn't taught that in school. Like, that's ridiculous. I'm pulling you out. So, and ultimately, if you have the ability to homeschool your children, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. Because also what we're going to see happening is that the more folks that start homeschooling, we're going to see homeschooling networks growing, homeschooling groups where we can band together and teach our children the correct history of our country, the values of the founding fathers, et cetera. And yes, I agree, Paula, they're going to try to stop the ability for us to homeschool. Well, at a certain point, we have to just not let them. At a certain point, we're just going to say, you know what? Screw you. I'm not paying attention. I'm not going to follow your laws anymore because they're corrupt and you're corrupt. So one website I'll show you just if you want to do any research on this. So fightforschools.com. If you've seen the video I showed you before of the parents reading from that softcore pornography that was being passed out to kids in 9th grade, that video was put together by fightforschools.com. So this is Fight for Schools. This is an organization that if you want to learn more about what you can do, how to get more involved, look for petitions to sign. There's actually a lot of different groups that are popping up that are fighting against this. This is what I'm seeing much more commonly now. They're really making headway. So visit, again, fightforschools.com. You can go on here and you can read about this. You can understand they've got a great intro video you can watch. You can sign up. And these are the things that we have to get more involved with. And one thing I will point out as we're getting into the Trump topic, which I know that Trump made a major made a major announcement about social media this morning, which I'm going to be covering in in tomorrow's show at noon, which will be digging into the new social media app Getter, what Trump is doing with his lawsuit. But anybody who's questioning Trump's intentions, I encourage you to read, or if you have friends that are, read this article by Trump. So Trump, I'm not sure if you know about this, but Trump has been publishing op-eds. The first, as I understand, the first op-ed he published is this one right here, which he focused on critical race theory. Now, again, this link is below in the description, so I really encourage you to read this and share this with your friends or family members. So his title is "A Plan to Get Divisive and Radical Theories Out of Our Schools." He says, as a candidate, Joe Biden's number one promise was to unite America. Yet in his first months as president, his number one priority has been to divide our country by race and gender at every turn. There is no clearer example than the Biden administration's new effort aimed at indoctrinating America's school children with some of the most toxic and anti-American theories ever conceived. It is vital for Americans to understand what this initiative would do, what drives it, and most importantly, how we can stop it. So I really encourage you to read this op-ed published by President Trump. And what he says, though, he says, thankfully, most Americans oppose this insanity. The left has only gotten away with it until this point because not enough parents have been paying attention and speaking up. But that is quickly changing. From Loudoun County, Virginia to Cupertino, California, parents are beginning to make their voices heard against the left-wing cultural revolution. What they need now is a plan to actually stop it. Now, I see someone actually in the comments saying that the links, they didn't see them below. As soon as I finish this video, I'm going to jump straight on to YouTube and put all the links in there for you. So I apologize if you don't see it there, but I'll make sure that all the links, I usually do it beforehand. This is a little bit kind of dicey because of yesterday's rescheduling. So I'll make sure that you have all of the links on today's show in the description below on YouTube. Okay. So one last thing so in this article, though, Trump lays out the steps. He has, looks like, I think there's 6 steps or 7 steps that Trump provides in this on how we can take back the education system. He ends it with this: make no mistake, the motive behind all this left-wing lunacy is to discredit and eliminate the greatest obstacles to the fundamental transformation of America. To succeed with their extreme agenda, radicals know they must abolish our attachment to the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and most of all, America's very identity as a free, proud, and self-governing people. The left knows if they can dissolve our national memory and identity, they can gain total political control they crave. A nation is only as strong as its spirit. For our children, we must act before it is too late. Right? So he sees it so clearly, and he's pointing out to us. And again, this is why I look to Trump as our leader. He's spot on with what he's doing, spot on with how he talks about communism, critical race theory, etc. So I want to end with one final video that it's a short video, but this is a very encouraging video. This is a Fairfax teacher talking to parents and children. It's only about a little over a minute. So let's go ahead and play this for you.
I'm a Fairfax County public school teacher, and I'm going to give a message of encouragement to parents and teachers and students who are too afraid to come and speak forward. Parents, the longer that you wait and you don't hold your child's schools accountable gives these guys more time to dictate what's best for your child's physical, mental, and emotional health. Don't be afraid to speak out for your kids because they are voiceless and they rely on you. You should be afraid of them rooting for socialism by the time they get to middle school. Teachers, it may seem that our careers have come to a dead end, but I'm here to remind you we don't work for the school board. We work to mold the next generation of well-rounded American patriots. So don't give up because it is up to us. Students, you are on the front lines of these indoctrination camps. Challenge the staff when you're presented with a ludicrous statement, and do not allow anybody to tell you that you cannot accomplish anything because of your skin color or to hate yourself because of your skin color. Students, it is up to you to be the next generation of victims or victors. And finally, to the board, this isn't over, and your policies are just as pathetic as making us wear a mask.
Nick Gofford, followed by Ryan.
She spoke so much truth, they cut her microphone off. Sound familiar? What's happening to all of us across social media? So to summarize, it's a few minutes till an hour's up. We have to really collectively, as parents, as patriots, as people that care about the future of our country, we have to get more involved. Understand what's happening in our school systems, understand what's happening legally, understand what's happening at the political level, which politicians are supporting, which politicians are opposing. We have to educate ourselves. We have to educate other parents. This is where the fight is at. There's a lot of things that we can be doing, and a lot of them are great. But I believe that the fight over critical race theory and what's happening with our children, especially, is one of the most important things that we can focus on. Now, I'll say we can't lose sight of the election audits and some of those other things as well, which are very, very important if we want to start correcting things. And we have the midterms coming up, et cetera. But it's very, very important that we just get more involved and stay inspired. But I think what's also important is that we understand that there are so many parents that see the exact same thing that we do. And there's so many parents that are standing up and speaking out. So we're not alone in this. And as you saw in the Breitbart article, 2/3 of the nation opposes this. 2/3 of the nation opposes this. So we are not alone in this. So again, there's hope. Let's keep fighting strong. We will overcome this. I'm so confident we will overcome this. If you didn't watch it yet, I highly recommend you watch Trump's rally. He just had in Sarasota. Very, very inspiring rally. I really recommend you watch that. Again, the links after the video is ended. I'll put the links below. Tomorrow, as I mentioned, so normally my schedule is Tuesday, Thursday. We had a mishap with the reschedule. So tomorrow on Thursday, I'll be diving into what's happening with the social media, the lawsuit that Trump announced today, the class action lawsuit against social media, talking about Getter, the new social media platform from Jason Miller, and all the other things surrounding that. So come join me again tomorrow. Again, thank you all. Thank you for sharing, helping this content reach more people. We're in this together. We're going to win. Thank you, and God bless.